Lydia, welcome to Podcastina.
It's wonderful to be here. So excited for our conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, thank you so much for being here. You have such a fascinating story. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump right in. Can you please share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I have a wild story. I have a crazy background. I grew up in a cult within the Mormon church that was led by my grandmother. So my grandmother was the leader of this cult, and I grew up truly believing, in the echo chamber of this story that there were a band of Satan worshipers that were chasing my brother and I, that they had already kidnapped us and broken our spine over and over, put needles in our eyes, brainwashed us so that at any point we could be triggered by some random word or symbol that we saw, and then our brains would be taken over by Satan. So I grew up terrified every single day of my life. My grandmother led this cult that had this belief, and spoiler, none of that happened. That's just what I believed was true all growing up. So my grandmother was like the cult leader, and my mother was like the cult liar. So she was the one getting all of these revelations from God about this secret underground network of Satan worshipers that controlled the whole world and was chasing us. So it was like running from a cult, kind of witness protection vibes, all in this weird Mormonism, satanic panic of the 80s. A lot of things converging to have not a great childhood, but as I say, I'm a cult survivor doing exceptionally well. So it does have a happy ending to the story, but that's my background.
That's just unbelievable. Can you share at what point you recognized that this was a cult and that you needed to find an exit?
It was really much later in life. So I had gone right from being in a cult, raised totally believing that, never having anyone challenge that, because when you're taught to keep something a secret or you'll die, then you don't end up talking to other people and finding any sort of, oh, what if that's not true, right? So I went right from growing up in a cult to going to college at BYU, which is a Mormon-owned university in Utah. And I went right from my cult family to a decade of an abusive marriage.
Mm.
So there was just this continuation of being in a really bad situation. And it's really interesting to see the parallels between like narcissistic abuse in a marriage and being raised in a cult. I'm like, oh, wow, there's a lot of similar principles here. So in that situation, I mean, it wasn't until I had my own daughter and she was a toddler that I started seeing that there were inconsistencies. And it wasn't until much later that I'm like, oh, these are all the tenets of a cult. Like I grew up in a cult. I think, no one ever called it that because of course we were just the people that knew the truth. We weren't a cult. We were running from satanic cults. No way that we could be one. So it was little things that came up, like my mother never dated anyone after she left my dad when I was a toddler, and then when I was 19 years old, she met this guy at a public library. He walked in, he's like missing teeth, his like hands are all mangled from fighting so much, and he like walks into the library. He's like, "I'm looking for a good Mormon woman to marry," and he just looks at my mom, and like 2 weeks later, they're married,
Wow.
and it was in that relationship that I saw my mom for the first time outside of the isolation of our cult in a relationship with someone else. And one day she comes to me and she's like, I'm being poisoned. And I remember thinking, like, oh, you said that my dad poisoned you. And now your new husband poisoned you. Like, how do you keep on finding these poisoners to marry? Like 100% poison record. So it was things like that that as I was an adult started seeming strange. And then it was really my desire to know the truth. So I fully believed the story that I was told, but I was told there were boxes and boxes of evidence of documenting all the horrible things that had happened. And I wanted to see them and I asked to see them. And what unfolded there is, in short, there was no evidence. And I started understanding how much of this was just a story, when instead of hiding in that story to be safe, I decided that a value more important than safety was truth. So that was like the short version, but it came in layers to find out that, like, oh, none of this is true.
Wow. And what sorts of things were part of the culture within the cult that now that you're out of it seem very obvious as signs that it is a cult.
Yeah. So, learning about cults after being in a cult, you're like, "Oh, I thought I was a special snowflake, and that was just
Mhm.
my family." But it's like, "No, this is just how cults work." So, there was a story that it was impossible to challenge it. And so we're running from these Satan worshipers, and if you ever tell anyone about it, then you'll be found and killed, and everyone you love is going to be killed. So there's really high stakes for ever sharing any of this information. And so, like that echo chamber of you're very isolated, you can't talk to anyone else, so your story can never be challenged, which is very in line with Mormon culture as well. So, one thing that kept me in the Mormon church for so long is that it is a sin to ever look at any what they call anti Mormon information, right? So, anything speaking against the Mormon church is a sin to look at, which means you only get information that's feeding back into the same story. And then there's the charismatic leader. My grandmother was extremely influential. She was like an influencer with followers
Mhm.
before anyone even knew that term, right? And it was with good old fashioned telephone and, people at church and neighbors. Like she had this huge network of people that would just unquestioningly do what she said. She was a rodeo queen and bride of the year, very well liked. And so she would spend hours and hours with me next to her on the couch and just calling people over and over, telling them this horrible story of how I'd been gang raped and my spine had been broken. And she would just repeat this story where I could hear it over and over. But for every person that she talked to, it was incredible. I never saw anyone except myself challenge my grandmother's story.
Wow.
Everyone believed it 100%. So they were like going without food and water for an extended period of time as like a strong prayer to keep the Satan worshipers away. She had all these people following her. So there was like the charismatic leader and the echo chamber and the isolated story. And um, yeah, you sort of go down the list. And later in life, I was like, oh, I guess it was a cult then. Now I have language for it.
That's remarkable, and I'm glad you point out that and it obviously, this is not an isolated problem with Mormonism, it exists in all sorts of cultures all over the world, but one of the first John Krakauer books I read, and he's my favorite author, is Underneath the Banner of Heaven, and it talks about these extreme branches within FLDS, and violence is a very common theme among, different cults, and there's it sounds like the food part too is really common, like, if anyone's seen, the Keith Raniere documentary, that food is often used as a manipulation tactic because I think you're easier to influence when you're really hungry, and so that tends to be one of the ways that it happens. Did anyone else come out of it with you? Was it just you?
So I don't know of anyone else that has stopped believing that story that started out believing it.
Wow.
My brother is still lives in the basement. He's in a room in the basement. He hasn't come out for I don't know how long. He's never had a job. He's never gone on a date. He's never gone to college. Um, I don't know of anyone that's outside of that story that started in it. When I realized that it was not true, I remember I felt really bad because I'm like, oh, these people believe something that's not true. So I remember I reached out to some individual people that I'd grown up with that were very on board with like, this is how the world works. It's all run by this band of Satan worshipers. And I remember reaching out to someone and being like, hey, I know this might be hard to hear, but everything that you've been told, I actually found out that it's not true. And I wanted you to know. And it was incredible to see how quickly that was shut down.
Mhm.
The line was, well, I don't know why your dear grandmother, who's one of the best people I've ever met, would ever lie about something like that. And so I tried a couple of times, but it was the same sort of response of like, how dare you accuse someone that is this incredible person of not telling the truth? There was no sort of curiosity or any questioning at all. So I'm the only one that I know of. Um, and so yeah, I made new friends. It was like it's really hard coming out of a cult because you're so isolated that once you're out, you're completely alone. Like you have to rebuild your whole life. And although I was never loved growing up, and I really come to terms with that. And like, I'm a lovable person and I know that, but I wasn't loved by my family of origin. So, although you're not leaving the people that love you because they don't, you're still going into this void of, I hope that I find my family. I hope I find people that do love me on the other side. So yeah, it's a hard transition, but it's worth it for
Of
sure.
course. I'm just digesting that because that's such a remarkable story. What do you remember feeling as you were getting out and starting to unravel all the rhetoric you grew up with?
Yeah, there was a lot at the same time. I remember one of the most distinct feelings that came up because within a couple of years, I left the cult that I'd grown up in. I divorced my abusive husband. Um, I left the Mormon church. I left the corporate world and started my own business. I became a single mother for the first time. I found my dad after 25 years of not being in contact with him. There was so much change. And it's a very strange feeling to look back at your entire past, which is our whole reference for our identity and our existence, and just realize like none of it's true. And the main feeling was what I call now an untethered feeling, is that it's like you're not attached to anything, and it's like flying, it's like jumping out of a plane and not knowing if your parachute's going to come out or if you don't have a parachute and you're about to hit the ground. So you vacillate between this like preparing for impact, like bracing yourself for impact, or maybe I just need to relax and enjoy this because maybe this is freedom. It's a very confusing loop. And I find that, we've, coached over 9,000 women since 2010 to deprogram from whatever was keeping them down. And they're in different degrees is this untethered feeling where our brain has a hard time because we're so wired for familiarity and that safety, that when things change really quickly, even if they're the best changes in the world, it can be really hard for our brains and our bodies to kind of settle into it. So it's really important to have tools to do that. But I would say that untethered feeling was one of the most unsettling during that crazy time.
Of course, because it's not pathologized to be tethered to a community, right? We're meant for that. We're born for community and belonging, and to exit a situation where you didn't even know what existed outside of that is just such like a bold move to make. So that kind of leads me into a discussion about what do you think are these like core programmings within people that are either holding them back or making them vulnerable to ending up in these types of communities, in cults, in any kind of harmful space, really? Like, what is that programming?
Yes. So the good news is that our brain has really clear patterns that it uses because it works, and our brain very much wants us to stay the same. So although everyone is unique, there are some underlying themes that when we have freedom from those patterns, like the patterns are pretty predictable, the tools to deprogram and to create a new identity for ourselves, when you know what works is predictable as well. So like that's the good news, and that it makes all the difference in the world. Because when I left all of these systems of oppression, what happened is that although I was physically and even intellectually out, the fear and like the fear in my nervous system when I went to try to make a better life for myself, it was that my nervous system, that feeling of not being safe that held me back. And I'm like, it's so maddening to intellectually understand that something's not true, but have your body just not let you move forward because you're still so afraid. So, a big part of even using our brains to create new patterns is to help our bodies and our nervous system to feel safe of like, yeah, it's going to be okay to create a better life. Like you can move forward, like you can do this. So, that's one of the biggest things. And it's important to look at how many systems that we have. Like, yes, a cult is an extreme example of this, but there are so many things that are set up on the same principles. Marketing is set up on the same principles of a cult and the manipulation, abusive marriage, a diet culture,
Mhm.
patriarchy, racism, sexism, like colonialism, like all of these things have the same tenets of a cult. So, how that registers oftentimes within us, like if we have a life where we want it to change, we want it to be better, we have a vision of what we want to change it to, and we just see that it's not changing. We've got the same goals, like every New Year's or every birthday. It's like it's the same thing. Why isn't it really changing or sticking? Here are some big underlying themes. There's a theme of not good enough,
Mhm.
there's imposter syndrome, people pleasing, perfectionism, and delay. Those are really, really big ones. And our brain uses that because, for instance, with delay, your brain can tell you, oh, we're totally going to make that change. We're totally going to have a better life. We're 100% going to do it tomorrow. Because look at how busy you are today. And like, oh, well, you're not really ready. And you should probably be certified in something else. And you should probably, work out this healing first. There's always a reason to delay. So our brain can like make those promises of, yes, it's going to be so much better. I promise just tomorrow. And 20 years can go by that way. So each one of these patterns has a way of keeping us back. Our brain is doing that to keep us safe, which is not efficient for creating a better life because that part of our brain that wants us to be safe is that survival lower part of our brain. And it's always going to prioritize something worse that is familiar than something that is so much better, but outside of what we're comfortable with.
100%. And I think in speaking on this, it's important we point out that people will think they're making a change when they're making the plans to do the change. But the planning and the implementation are two different things, right? And I think the dieting or getting more fit in general is a really good example because you'll see someone buy the gym membership or sign up for class pass or buy the workout clothes and do everything but. And so you're checking things off of the checklist of, well, I'm doing A, B, and C. I'm buying the workout clothes. I'm signing up for the gym membership to actually say, oh, I'm doing the things to implement the change, but they're doing everything but going out and lifting the weight.
Absolutely. And there's some really interesting parallels here between like the diet industry or Fitspo and being in a cult. Like it's incredibly similar. So I had a life-threatening eating disorder for years, and that was one of the very first things that I used the principles that the neuroscience backed principles that got me out of a cult so I could live like the life I wanted to were the same ones that ended up being effective for ending my eating disorder. So we've
Mm.
helped over 1,000 women to end their eating disorders. And what happens is information is not transformation. So, just like what you said, people will get
Ugh,
more information and they'll prepare. And we get the same little dopamine hit in our brain of like, oh, I did something today because I made a plan, but didn't actually do it. But then the thing that the $78 billion diet industry does is it sells us a solution that is actually it's like selling us something that is actually the poison that's making us sick and then selling us the antidote to that poison that is actually making us sick again, which is very cult like, right? So restriction creates cravings. So the diet industry tells us, oh, you should cut out carbs or you should cut your calories or whatever it is. And that biologically creates cravings. So like a 21 day, sprint or fast or, going to cut this out. That's about the time where our willpower has a huge drop. So we can willpower something for about 21 days. You have this huge drop. And then, for instance, if you're cutting out sugar, your body is creating big cravings for sugar. So you've got the willpower drop, huge cravings for sugar. You binge on all the sugar, and then you feel so horrible and so down. And then the algorithm's like, here's the next fad diet that you need to do because you're so miserable now. And it's restriction, but in a different way. So it keeps us in these cycles. And it's actually very cult like because it's like, here's the thing that you need to do to be safer, to be a good cult member, or, for your survival, or to be holy, or whatever it is. And it's the very thing that's keeping you captive and not free and destroying your life. But we're always trying to do the thing harder that is actually hurting us more. And that's a bad system. When we can recognize that and get out of those systems, like that creates a really good life.
I'm still stuck on the information is not transformation. I love that quote so much. That's so valuable. I'm you probably saw this, there was a book that came out, let me look up the author's name, I just read it a couple of months ago. It's called Cultish. Where is the let's see. Oh, Amanda Montell. So Cultish by Amanda Montell. She actually makes that connection between CrossFit and cults and different I think it was core power yoga and cults, and it's not the same as obviously the extremeness of what you went through and like isolating people, but that these marketing companies, as you said, like the marketing techniques are using similar tactics to get people to subscribe to these systems, and they're just doing it for profit. They're not doing it because they're so concerned about the customer's well-being, and that's really where so much of the danger lies. And so with that, I think a good question is, what do you think are obvious red flags so that people can stop falling down these rabbit holes?
Yeah, that's a great thing because as long as we recognize it and we know the tools to be able to get out of the patterns that we've been in and to not go back into those cycles, like we're in a really good place. So I think it's actually very important to recognize that we can call something culty and we can call a lot of things culty because we live in a capitalist society where that's actually that's marketing, right? Like that's the
Right.
thing that we're so exposed to. But then to go upstream and to understand that the ways that cults create community or belonging, leadership, all of those things are not inherently bad. And for most people doing bad things, they didn't create it themselves. They've stolen it from someone else. So for instance, there are indigenous cultures or, like lots of ways that we've been as humans that worked really well when the interest and the care is good in community that cults have taken and then twisted to make a bad thing. So I don't think it's wise to throw out anything that feels kind of culty or has a charismatic leader or has community because those are human things. Like those are important. What we need to recognize is the intention behind it. So one thing to look at is freedom, right? Like is it easy to come in to the community? Is it easy to leave the community? Shame is a big thing that's used. So for high control religions like Mormonism, there's a lot of shame in ever leaving or ever not doing everything perfectly. So if you're in a community that feels wonderful and nurturing and you're like, "Oh, I feel so good in this community. I hope it's not culty." Think to yourself, "Could I leave without shame? Could I
Mm.
leave and people would cheer me on in my own decisions and intuition for myself?" Because we actually want really close community. But when you see that it's a community that really looks at the individual's freedom and respects that, where our authority of what we want for ourselves is respected way more than what someone else is telling you that you want for yourself or that you should do, that's a really important one to look at. Is like, how much is my freedom prioritized?
So, in learning all of this and then starting your business, how did you make that connection of women really need help out of this specifically? Like, there's all these marketing tactics that are specifically attacking women, and the programming for us to not have self worth and be afraid to do things on our own. Like, talk to me about the connection and how that kind of led to you starting your business.
Yeah, I didn't plan to start a business. I I had gotten out of this cult and honestly, I'm like a miracle of a human being. Like my life is so good and it is so unlikely for me to have this beautiful life with where I've come from. And the reason that I could do that is because in leaving the cult, there are neuroscience backed principles that I was learning about. And I took those, what I was learning, and I made my own modality. It was completely a new thing because I didn't know anything that worked. And I had been looking and I needed, it was like a survival thing. So I created my own modality just for myself. We now call it the 5 C's. And it worked. Like I was able to get out of a cult. I never thought that I would share that with anyone else. I kept this cult story a secret for so long because I thought it was so weird and bizarre. Like I didn't want people to know that about me. And it wasn't until later on in life when I was binge eating and I was out of control and I was bulimic and I was restricting and I was in this yo yo cycle. Like being in a cult was bad being in an abusive marriage was bad, being in the Mormon church was bad, but they weren't as bad on the day-to-day misery as an eating disorder was.
Mhm.
And I got to the point where I was like, if this is what my life is going to be, like I fought so much for my survival. And if this is going to be my life, like I don't think it's worth it. And I was really at the rock bottom point of like, I don't want to keep going if I can't fix this problem. And I remember I just like collapsed in my closet one day and I was just sobbing and wondering if it made sense to keep living. And I, after for years trying everything, like everything to try to end this eating disorder, and nothing was working and it all made it worse. I remember being on the floor in my closet and it occurring to me for the first time. I wonder if I could deprogram from my eating disorder like I deprogrammed from the cult. And in 1 week, I was completely free. And I have been ever since. Never binged again. Like it worked so, so well. And at that point, I was a health coach, totally imposter syndrome, right? I'm like a health coach with a secret eating disorder. And I had already built like a pretty big business, but I was working, with someone else sort of in a corporate structure. And I was like, wow, this is so effective. I wonder if anyone else is struggling with this. And they were. Like there were so many people that had secret eating disorders that on the outside were like, look at my abs. And on the inside
Mhm.
was like, I have to figure out some way to fix this because it's I'm such an imposter. And so we started doing focus groups. We helped hundreds and hundreds of people to end their eating disorders. We found it worked really well in all sorts of different situations. And so I made a big pivot. I'm like, you know what? This is what we want to focus on. We want to end eating disorders. So we went on to help over 1,000 women to do that. We, still help people in that, but we found out these principles are amazing for leadership and they're amazing for, manifesting, creating the life that you want. And so we've done like leadership training for the US Army and like we've, coached executives all over. And then the next step was in the last year, have been deprogramming from capitalism. So all this is like really fresh on my mind. And although these principles are so effective and we've helped, over 9,000 people, it's been executives and leaders and big companies. And we're like, we want these principles to be available to everyone in the world. So right now we're developing an app that is going to be free and open to every woman in the world to create community and to have the principles that used to have a high price tag and a lot of gatekeeping. We just want that to be available. So that was the decision. Like it was like I kept on stumbling into my own survival and it working and then realizing that other people needed it. And I feel like it's been phases of that as, we've created, this business and this community. And it's been a really wild journey that I could have never predicted.
I see you talk a lot on your social media, and I love this, and I bet it's relevant, but examples of man science and how that plays into these lessons.
Yes, absolutely. So the man science series,
Mhm.
as we say, is just dudes doing this shoddy, sloppy science to support themselves feeling special. That we still believe this as like scientific fact today, and so often it's just totally made up, or it's completely like bad science, like you couldn't draw those conclusions from. And it really comes from like science and really everything being so patriarchal and male dominated. Like I truly believe that one reason that women are kept out of wealth and out of science and out of decision making is because women have a very strong integrity where they will say if something is wrong, even if it is a detriment to themselves. And when you have this echo chamber, which is extremely culty, of all men making decisions and all men just like not fact checking each other and like, oh, it's a man that said it, so it must be good. It creates this huge, huge problem that affects us in massive ways. Like women die every day because, for instance, there's drugs that aren't usually tested on women still today, usually not tested on any women until it's on the market and women can give money for it. And then they're like, oh, yeah, women, you can use it now. So it's a series that is like whistleblowing on the corruptness of this ridiculous science that just doesn't make sense. And we say a better world for women is a better world for everyone. And in the inverse, a worse world for women is a worse world for everyone. So part of that series is calling that out because information is not transformation. However, you want to start with opening up that transformation with good information. And I find that it is extremely healing and empowering for women to understand that the thing that they intuitively knew for so long and felt like, well, questioning and gaslighting ourselves, and maybe I was crazy, to be like, actually, this was a completely made up thing that some man dude did that like has nothing to do with you, isn't even true. One of our videos that went viral on that is that, having 8 hours of sleep, that's how many hours on average that men need. Those sleep studies were never done on women. And when they did a study on women and found out that women actually need like 9, 10 hours of sleep on average a night. So you've got all these extremely sleep deprived women where we've been told our whole lives that, oh, well, you're lazy if you're getting more than 8 hours of sleep. And it's a science fact, in quotes, that wasn't for us. That has nothing to do with us. And there's so many things like that. And it was incredible to see in the comments, because it has like 1.5 million views or something. All of these women like, I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. Like I was punishing myself for it and feeling bad about it, but there's some part of me that knew I needed more sleep. So that kind of information is a great doorway to next is transformation.
Absolutely. I read this book, and I would imagine a million people brought it up in the comments of that, called Invisible Women, that talks about these data gaps that exist. And there's so many things in that book. I would highly encourage people to open it and look through it, that blew my mind. But just one example is that seatbelts were not tested on a woman's body or a pregnant woman's body until like within the last 10 years.
It's absolutely insane, and it's still not. There's only 2 or 3 car companies that have even attempted to do that, and some of it's still not effective. It's like, "We tested on women because we tested it on smaller male dummies." It's like, well, it's not the same with weight distribution and all of that. So, Volvo is the only car company at this point that has made legitimate tests consistently on women's safety in cars, but because of that, I think it's like 17% more likely to die in a car accident as a woman because the safety features were never tested for us. And it didn't even start until 2019. That wasn't that long ago. And it's only been a few companies since. So there's so many things like that. Like this is not a problem of the past. Like this is something that we are still dealing with right now that is still affecting our health and our safety and everything.
Yeah. It really is. I wanted to ask, what are some of the more like egregious examples that you've learned of and that you're really trying to shed light on?
Yeah. I think it's really important to look at the examples of science, I'll put in quotes, man science, where it's all about reinforcing how women should be. So that's why we talk about, women in the wild. We have a Women Gone Feral series. It's about, women in the animal kingdom and how they are and the huge variance of who women are. Because what happened is that most of what we think of in the natural world being woman is just been cherry picked by men to be like, yes, human women, you should be this way because look, this is natural and in the animal kingdom. And it's totally understandable that men are aggressive or men are violent because look, this is who they are in the animal kingdom. But they're only pointing, it's the confirmation bias of like, this is how women should be. So any sort of study, any sort of finding in quotes that is about how women should be or what they should want or how they should perform, I think that is something we should be highly suspect of because over and over and over, that has just been a completely made up, ridiculous thing. And what it comes down to is that so often these are findings that just haven't included women at all. So there's a book that I just started reading. It's called Eve: How Women's Bodies Have Forwarded 200 Years of Evolution, or something like that. I might not have gotten the subtitle quite right. But she talked in it how she's looking at these studies. And even today, for most of the studies, they don't break down if they've included women in the studies at all. And most of the time it's all men. So she was literally having to email the scientists that did these studies to find out if they had included women. And they hadn't, like, over and over and over. So even in a paper where it's like, these were our test subjects, people aren't even saying if women are included. And most of the time it's 100% men. So to just be very, very skeptical of anything that is coming out that tells women how to be, or is anything that is said to be for the population, it's probably just about men. Like, even today, like most all of the time, it's only men that are being studied.
What is that? Like, if you had to come up with your own working definition of the patriarchy, what is it and why is it hurting not only women, but men as well?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna like go big here, but
Mhm.
I'll like make it really like the fast version because I'm gonna talk about all of human history really fast. Okay. So there are 25,000 years where we were a matriarchy. And we, like, people all around the world, it wasn't just in one area, people all around the world just assumed that God was a woman. And when you assume that deity is a woman, then how women are treated, uh, that's very affected by that, right? With everyone that is in like ancient religions in the first 25,000 years of our human history. So women's leadership was assumed and things were going really well. So a really big important difference between a patriarchy and a matriarchy is a patriarchy is like a triangle where there's false scarcity. All of capitalism is built on scarcity. So if you think of a triangle, it's smaller at the top, and there's false scarcity. There's not enough for everyone. There's not enough safety. There's not enough money. There's not enough homes. There's not enough food. And so with patriarchy, everyone is trying to compete to be a person that has enough. With matriarchy, it's not a triangle, it's like a circle where everyone is equal in that circle and everyone is looking to the center of the circle of what is our mission. And that is to have enough for everyone. That is to have everyone taken care of. That is to prioritize the community instead of try to be on top and compete with someone else. So matriarchy worked really, really well. And then there was in the series called the Goddess series on our channels. There was we call them Bro Clan, right? Early Indo-Europeans, but essentially it was this group of undesirable white male dudes that were mad because women made the decisions and they weren't getting chosen because they were the
Sounds
violent ones that
familiar.
all the women were like, no, really familiar, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's insane how little this has changed. It's ridiculous. They were literally early tech bros. So they learned how to make tech, like weapons and boats that could take them farther, and they gate kept that tech. It's almost insane how familiar this is. And then they just started going to all these matriarchal communities, like genocide and convert or die, and replacing all of the records of goddess worship with just male names. So patriarchy has only been around for the last like 3,000 years. Clearly, it's not working. And it's set up for undesirable men to still have more than everyone else, which is completely unnatural from the 25,000 years that we came from. So patriarchy is bad for everyone because it's clearly bad for women because it's misogynistic and it's all about keeping women down and, brainwashing, like I'll say gaslighting women into thinking that they're inferior when we've been leaders. Like, we can feel that in our bodies of our power, but we're told that, we're the inferior gender. And it's really bad for men because all of the men, it's a race to the bottom. So patriarchy is for undesirable men to have more than everyone else. And so it means that all men are socialized to be undesirable men and to uplift undesirable men, which makes them very undesirable. We've got birth rates plummeting right now.
Mhm.
Like, we've got women that are just like, centering themselves and decentering men. So we're going back to our roots, but essentially that's why patriarchy is bad for everyone. And a return to matriarchy, that circle, that's one reason why our company is called the She Center, right? So it's about centering us as women, which is better for everyone because it's not a new thing. Like, we're going back to something that's really important. So that was my super quick history of the entire world answer.
I love that so much. There's so much in there that's valuable and the undesirable men, and that I had to stop and laugh because it's this what we call the red pill community these days. And their whole rhetoric, which I wish I wasn't exposed to, but again, it's like there's no way to avoid it and not run into it if you're a person with the internet and a phone these days, where it's all about, oh, they're not picked, so let's demonize women, let's other them because they only want the chads, as they call them. They only want the top little bit percentage, and it's, I mean, just irrefutably untrue when you look at the fact that like 50% of men are married and that many men that don't look like Brad Pitt or whatever you want to say, like whatever they use to say, oh, women are only going after this small sliver of men, it's just not true. And what is true is that you see this rise in independence and finally within just what the last 30, 40 years we have access to things like credit cards and being financially independent and home ownership. Now it's about, I just saw yesterday, 20% of single home buyers are women versus just 8% of men who are buying homes by themselves.
Yeah.
And so that disparity, it's so hard to like try to explain and come in and be like, hey, this is only because, not because women don't want partners, it's because they choose peace and being by themselves instead of choosing an oppressive relationship. So it's not that we don't want to be in relationships, it's that we don't want to be in oppressive relationships, and that choosing to be alone is the better alternative.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to see that in that, and this has literally been like the slogan since 3,000 years ago with Bro Clan of like, you can be an undesirable male and get everything and you don't have to change. In fact, you can be worse.
Mhm.
And what seems like the obvious answer is like, if you are undesirable to women, become desirable. Like, ask a woman how to do it. She knows how. You know what I mean? It's like we are improving ourselves. You know, we have a culture of like growth, personal development. Like that's available to everyone. It's available to everyone. So, yeah, it's weird, but it's not new. Like it's incredible to see that for 3,000 years, you know, and this is a common thing that comes up, which I think is a really important principle to keep on reinforcing, is that any system that is natural, that is good, does not need so much violence to uphold. And patriarchy requires a huge amount of violence. And so the hopeful part of that is that it falls really easily, and it's falling right now. And I know that these are like hard times, and it can be overwhelming to see everything that's happening. But it's just like the way that it's been the whole time, and we're just being honest about it now, and no one's trying to spin a story about it. It's like, yeah, it's always been gross, it's still gross, and now it's time for something new. And I see so many people like really rising up in their own lives, rising up with a community of we're done and we're done. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, and just to be crystal clear, it's not about putting men down. Like, I would love to talk about what are some of the ways that men can contribute to this and not fear the term matriarchy, but to see how it will benefit them as well. Like, what are those benefits to them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think any man who is fearing the word matriarchy probably has an understanding of how horrible patriarchy is for women. Because most people, you know, misunderstand and think, oh, matriarchy is just patriarchy, but with women in charge. First of all, no, like, you know, women don't take their leadership strategies from men. Like, it's not patriarchy. It's a completely different thing. And that's such a patriarchal lens to like focus everything through, like, oh, well, it's got to be this, but just like switched around. No, it's a totally different structure. And it's not our job to convince men of the benefits of matriarchy. They can see how bad patriarchy is. They can see they're not happy. Like you can be as miserable as you want to be, but men are so capable. Like the the root of who a man actually is outside of a male performance in patriarchy is incredible. I have a partner who is a man who has examined his patriarchal privilege and is really happy and is really like embodied in his manhood. And part of that is he doesn't fear women. Like he doesn't need to keep them down. Like he sees women as equals and he wants to learn from women. And he's had so many female mentors and he's really happy. I think that any man who is still buying into red pill or whatever it is can look at his life and be like, you're miserable. And it's no one else's job to make you unmiserable. We have so many resources, and men are so capable that it's like, make your life better. And here's what's going to happen: when men get in touch with their true, like what being a man is, not in performance of patriarchy, but in their true authenticity, we have memory in our bodies. Like we know how to move toward a better life. And when men start doing that in an organic way and their lives start getting better, if they happen to study it a bit, they'll be like, oh, look, all the things that I'm authentically doing that are making my life better. There's a word for that. It's called matriarchy. Those are the principles. So I don't think it's a convincing anyone. It's like, yeah, make a better life for yourself if you want one. If not, then please step out of the way and we're going to make the world better.
I love that so much. Can we talk about some of the examples in the wild, in the animal kingdom of matriarchy, since everybody likes to point to that as the example?
Yes. Um, so I think that one extreme but really fun example of this is you have a matriarchy when you have no men. Like there are so many all female species. I think that every woman in the world should know this because I learned this like recently and I'm like, why aren't we shouting this from the rooftops? So one example is the whiptail lizard. They're they've always been women. There's never been a male whiptail lizard. And in fact, every species that we as human beings and everyone else evolved from started out as all female species. So we started out all female whiptail lizards, just never changed their mind. Like they're still all female and they mate. So, like, they'll do some tail wagging and change positions, and it's like pleasurable for both of them. And then they both ovulate and they clone themselves. So, what all female species do is they clone themselves. So, every single whiptail lizard, they're like, I point out here because, like, they're in my backyard. They're all over. They're one of the most common lizard here in Santa Fe. So, they're all clones. They all look the same because they're all female and they clone themselves. And some of the strongest species in the world, like that have been around the longest, that are the hardiest, are all female species. So essentially, men were created as a DEI initiative. Like evolution, like it was literally that. Evolution was like, all female species, cool. But if you created men, they could be there to like be a helpmeet to you, help you out. And also, it creates more genetic variance, which can make the species stronger genetically. So, as women, we created men as a DEI initiative. And it did make more variance, right? All the beautiful diversity. It's a huge part of what makes nature strong. And so that right there is really important to understand that men are like a new invention when you look at like the history of the world. And there are a lot of conclusions you could take from that. But when you look at how evolution has really favored women, how we've always been leaders, how we've been around for so much longer than men, and that in patriarchal structures. So, a great example is chimps and bonobos. So, we are equally related to both of these primates. And with chimps, they are a patriarchy, as in males fight for the being in charge and it's violent. But here's an important thing about chimps is that the women who are in charge of the other women, right? So the highest ranking female, she's a kingmaker. So there is no male that can be in charge unless she approves him.
Wow.
And so that's an example of patriarchy, but we're equally related to the bonobos, and they're a matriarchy. And the thing about matriarchies is it's not only that women are leading, but it's an extremely stable leadership because the other bonobos are following her because of respect, because of how she takes care of people. So it's not a fight for the top. It's a one woman will all like oftentimes be the matriarch for her whole life because she's incredibly respected And so it's stable and people are taken care of. And groups of single bonobos, who are, the females, will go around together and there is no aggressive male behavior because if male bonobos ever try to be aggressive, they just get like physically reprimanded by these groups of single ladies. So, problem taken care of. And no one, like, man science loves to be like, look, we're like chimps and they're so aggressive. We're like, well, we are equally related to bonobos and they're doing a lot better and they're a matriarchy. So that's very consistent in matriarchies is very stable leadership and everyone being taken care of. And there are a lot of matriarchies out there. They're doing well. And I absolutely believe that biologically, as human beings, we are a matriarchy that has been in a very strange patriarchal experiment for a few thousand years and that we're going back to our roots now.
I hope so. And I know among other highly intelligent animals, and correct me if I'm wrong, aren't orcas and elephants also in matriarchies?
Yep, they both are.
What does it look like in their worlds?
Yeah. So community, like with orcas, is so incredibly important, and they're a matriarchy, and they've really stable communities. Um, one one sadness about matriarchies, not a bad thing, but something that has made them susceptible to essentially evil patriarchal ideas, is like with orcas, they cannot imagine being outside of community. Like community is so important. So for a long time, SeaWorld and these other kind of, corrupt uh, zoo places, you go in and you capture one orca in the wild, and then you can just capture all the rest. Because if you capture one member of the community, they don't abandon them in some way. They all just stay there because they can't imagine being outside of community. So like they all get captured. And I think this has happened in a lot of indigenous cultures as well, where because of the matriarchal roots, people come in, colonialists come in with violent intentions. But in matriarchy, it's like, oh, okay, like let's take care of everyone. Like, how can we help you adjust here? So it's a really important thing to go back to that, but then to also, I think, have things in check. Learn from our history to protect ourselves from those who would take advantage of that. With elephants as well, like they're matriarchs just for a lifetime. Stay as matriarchs. There's a big focus in matriarchies in making sure that children are taken care of. A lot of matriarchies in human history have really prioritized like neurodivergent people because it's a really good ethical check on the society because neurodivergence questions systems and can see outside of rules and groupthink. And with orcas, for instance, every disabled orca is very well taken care of, and there are systems to make sure that they're fed and taken care of. It's about the community all being taken care of instead of how can we be the person that gets the most resource and everyone else doesn't have enough. That's such a ridiculous system that is the water we swim in. So yeah, I think it's a great reference to look at matriarchies in the wild and be like, yeah, that works way better.
That's so beautiful. For women who might be walking in their day to day life with these limiting self beliefs that come from patriarchy, a lot of which I think are subconscious beliefs, what are some of those beliefs that we can bring to the conscious so we can start addressing them?
Yes. So, what you said right there, bringing it from the subconscious to the conscious, is one of the most important things because we have all sorts of things that we believe that run our behavior that when they go unquestioned, they're invisible to us. So, we just keep on acting out of those things. So, there's a lower part of our brain that has those sorts of repeated ideas that drive our behavior that we're not aware of. And the way to change and to question and to see those things in our awareness and be like, oh, this isn't serving me is to see those things through the higher part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex. It's like behind our forehead. And there's actually a very cool neurohack that is like the first part of the 5 C's that we teach. An element of that is when you emotionally feel it first. So maybe you feel scared about something or you feel some anxiety or you feel not good enough. You feel that feeling first. Start saying the thoughts out loud that are associated with it. And what happens when you say it out loud is it's this fun little neuro hack because your higher brain that can question those patterns is also the part of your brain that's in charge of speech. So when you start saying it out loud, you will have more in awareness and you will be able to challenge your thoughts better with saying it out loud than if you're just trying to figure it out in your own mind. So that's a really fun way to start bringing it into awareness, but notice the compass of your emotions first. Emotions, feelings, or feedback, it's a really powerful, powerful thing. So whenever you notice that you feel off, don't gaslight yourself, don't question yourself, don't say, I shouldn't feel this way. Be like, there's something here for me, and start speaking those things out loud. And then you can start reprogramming them. But the awareness is the really important piece first.
I love that. Feelings are feedback. That's huge. Well, Lydia Knight, if people want to learn more about what you're doing, where should they go?
Yes, so we have so many fun things happening. We just had the book come out. So, Split is what it's called. It's called Split, a double memoir. And it is the story of myself growing up in a cult and my dad's story of looking for his kids for 25 years. And so that is out, of course, on social media. It's at the She Center. That's our handle, anywhere that you like social media. And we've got fun series there. And for everything together with handy links to the social media and anything fun we have coming up and the app coming out soon, you can go to theshecenter.org/podcast. And you'll have a link to the book Split, a double memoir there. And when you go to theshecenter.org/podcast, I'll give you one more little tip because we talked about how information is not transformation. So transformation is when you start taking action towards something. So literally when you're physically typing that in to your browser and you go to that page, do a little celebration because our brain really pays attention to celebration. And what's really fun is that in celebrating, you doing something where you went from consuming information to taking action on it, you want to reinforce that with your brain. So that's like a fun thing that you can do as well when you go and visit that. But you'll be able to find that, search it up, and we'll be excited to have you part of the community.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I got a lot out of this.
Thanks for having me on. What a beautiful thing to focus on. And yeah, excited for what we get to do next with this information as we turn it into transformation.
Me too. And thank you, everybody, for listening.